Thank you so much. My name is Charlene Li. I've been a long-time analyst and author. I've written 6 books. One of them is a New York Times bestseller, and I'm working on a next one about generative AI and how companies can use it. So today I'm going to be sharing some of the preliminary research and case studies. And I just want to show you just one survey that I recently did with CIOs and other leaders. And one of the things that, let's see, my slides are here, not here. Can we show my slides? Let's see. Are you coming up? Here we go. Oh, wrong slides. Those are the presenter views. Go back a little bit. And I am controlling them because I didn't realize I had them. Here we go. So what we found was that of 78 CIOs and IT leaders, vast majority of them believe that AI is going to be transformative. But when we asked them how many of them are personally using it, it was astounding. Very few are actually using it on a regular basis. Only 10% were using it every day, and another 10% were using it several times a week in a way that really impacted the work. And I just want to see a show of hands here. How many of you are actively using some of these generative AI tools yourselves? Raise them really high. OK. How many are using it every day? Oh, hands still going down. So what I'm going to be talking about today is how do we go from this knowing to doing, to leading. Because I think in many ways, that's what we're trying to grapple with. We know what the technology can do. We know it's transformative. But how do we actually create a strategy around this? How do we actually get to the nuts and bolts of doing things? And so what I'm going to talk about today are the threats that we have to deal with, understanding what the big bets are going to be, and then making sure we have no regrets about these choices that we make. So I'm going to start with the threats. Because when it comes to understanding threats, you can't move forward, I believe. We hear talking about the perils of AI. We can't move forward unless we know we're safe. We need that actual safety and the psychological safety to know that what we're doing can actually work and is not going to get us in trouble. Otherwise, we're always going to be second-guessing ourselves. And when I talk to organizations, the same CIOs, 41% are doing nothing right now. And then a small percentage are actually doing these other activities. So 38% have some guidelines in place. 38% have identified and started testing some use cases. 28% have assembled some sort of generative AI council. And 13% have some training. And only 13% have begun drafting a generative AI strategy. Now, we can say it's early on. But it's not early along so much that you can at least have some of these foundational moves, at least have the guidelines in place. And when I talk to these CIOs and these C-suites and these directors on boards, why haven't you done anything? Oh, we're trying to figure out what the regulatory landscape looks like. Until that's figured out, we're not going to do anything. Well, you can be waiting a long time. Well, we don't know how the technology is going to change. You don't want to make any investments. And they think it's, well, isn't it too early to make any investments in here? And the fundamental problem here is that they're looking at it as an enterprise technology, an application that you supposedly can control from inside the inner sanctum of an organization. And the reality is we know it's nothing like that. We know that people can use this at home. They use it already on their mobile phones. And they come to work and it's vague about what we can do, what we can't do. There's no clarity. And you can see how it could absolutely benefit you, how it could make work so much better, and you're not allowed to touch it. We have this incredible tool that can turn any of our team members, any of our colleagues, ourselves, into superhumans, capable of doing incredible things, and yet we won't go near it. And so I want to talk about how we can really think about putting in place those basic guidelines, because then we can go on and talk about the bets. And even here, when companies do get over that hurdle of trying to figure out what they can avoid doing, so guidelines are in place, they're figuring out, like, maybe we should start small. You hear that over and over again. But the problem is, this technology is so transformative. We actually make a mistake if we start too small. If we're just looking for the easy cases that we can go and put into place, we're missing the big opportunities. So I think here we have to think big. What are the big strategic problems we can tackle? What are the big strategic bets we can make? And what I found in my research is that organizations that began back in December a year ago, the ones who did this really well, who put in place very quickly a generative AI approach, did one thing in common. And that is, they started with their purpose. They started with their values. They established bedrock principles. They looked to their existing business strategy and used that to figure out, okay, what are we going to do with this technology? What they did is, our strategy is based on certain assumptions that we have made about the world, that these are the sources of our competitive advantage. Now we can look at generative AI and say, will it help us? Will it hurt us? And use that as a starting point. Because unless you take that strategic view of generative AI, you're going to think of it as, oh, it's a nice little toy here. It's really quite dangerous. I'm just going to put it to the side. But if we understand the strategic implications of what this technology could mean to the core of our business, then we look at it from a very different perspective. Let me share with you 2 case studies. The first one was an organization, a large publicly traded company, and they said, we went back to our values. What are the values and foundational principles about how we are as an organization? Because we need to look at that in order to understand how generative AI can help us. So they went back to their principles, and they said, we will never let this technology ever take away jobs. We're going to use this as an augmentation for our people. And we also know that our strategic advantage comes from creating a fantastic customer experience. So they started immediately looking at all the different ways it could influence. And by the first quarter, they were doing experiments. They were solidifying how they were using generative AI to support that. The tale of another case study, though. This is a very large nonprofit. And what they realized was that they weren't ready to go out there publicly. They just knew that that was going to be a long, long road to really get to that point where they were comfortable. But they knew that there were a lot of internal processes that were holding them back from being able to deliver the services they wanted to do to their people that they were serving. So they looked at all the places where they were sticking in their operations and said, how can generative AI help us? And by Q1 and Q2, had those things in place also. But they went back to what their purpose and their mission was. And they asked, how can generative AI really move the needle significantly to move us forward? And I think the last area to think about is making sure that you have no regrets. These are the threats, the bets, and the no regrets. How do you do this when everything is constantly changing in generative AI? You just saw from KPMG and what we saw with all the changes that just happened in the last 2 weeks. I feel like I wake up every morning and my hair is on fire with all the changes. How do we ever keep up? So one of the things around making sure you have no regrets is thinking about how you define success and how you define failure.